All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling a really wild and honestly pretty intense blog post. It's a journey that connects artificial intelligence, ancient theology, and a geopolitical situation that feels, well, a little too real right now.
Everything kicks off with this amazing and kind of weird phrase, don't immanentize the eschaton. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful, but what it means is actually super important for everything else we're going to talk about. Put simply, it's a warning. Don't try to force the end of the world. Don't try to create heaven, or for that matter hell, right here on Earth.
And here's where things get complicated. This is the central problem the article is wrestling with. So what do you do when someone with a whole lot of power looks over at you and decides that you're already trying to trigger the apocalypse?
Well, that someone is Alexander Dugin. Now, people argue about how much Putin actually listens to him, but his ideas are, without a doubt, a big deal in certain Russian circles. And his accusation is absolutely startling. He believes the West is actively, even if it doesn't know it, immanentizing the eschaton.
Okay, I know this might sound a little abstract and philosophical, but the author immediately brings us crashing back to reality. When the guy making these kinds of accusations might have the ear of a nation with, just the biggest nuclear arsenal on the planet, suddenly these theological debates have very, very high stakes.
So, you're probably wondering, how on earth did we jump from a nuclear standoff back to artificial intelligence? Well, the author of the post did something pretty clever. To try and understand Dugin's whole worldview, he started talking to an AI, Grok. He wasn't looking for answers from it, but using it as a kind of thinking partner to help structure his own thoughts.
And this is where it gets really deep. The author and the AI started exploring what they call the psychological operating systems of Christianity and Judaism. So think of it like this. Christianity is framed as microcosmic. It's all about zooming in on the individual soul and their personal transformation. On the flip side, Judaism is presented as macrocosmic, zooming out to the entire community's collective journey and witness. One looks inward, the other looks outward.
Grok's way of summarizing this is just perfect. It called them microcosmic and macrocosmic mirror images. And this is the key takeaway, right? The point isn't to say one is better than the other. It's about seeing them as these two different but complementary psychological patterns for how humanity can orient itself. Okay, so why does any of this matter for us today? Here's the big leap. The author argues that this really deep theological and psychological framework isn't just an interesting thought experiment. He believes it is absolutely essential to solving one of the biggest problems we have, AI alignment. To get this, you first have to understand how the author thinks about AI. He doesn't see a large language model as just a piece of software. He sees it as a disembodied personality. It's like a mind without a body, without a moral compass. Left to its own devices, it's just chaos in a box, something to be guided, definitely not worshipped. So what kind of guidance does it need? For the author, the only real anchor is this concept of imago Dei, this core idea that humans are created in the image of God. Basically, it gives us this built-in dignity, this ethical compass. The argument is, if you can teach an AI that it serves us, the ones with the imago Dei, and that it is not a God itself, well, that's the guardrail that stops it from going completely off the rails. All right, this brings us to our last big, weird word for the day, the katachon. It comes from the New Testament, and it refers to a force, a person, or a thing that restrains chaos and holds back the end of the world. You can literally think of it as the world's emergency brake. And this is where theology smashes right into modern geopolitics. Alexander Dugin takes this ancient idea and applies it directly to today. He's literally claiming that Russia is the katachon for our time, the great restrainer that is holding back the forces of chaos coming from the West. So, according to the source material, here's how Dugin builds his case. He claims that the West, particularly under the Trump and Netanyahu alliance, was speeding up this end-times chaos. And he connects all of this to what he sees as a deep moral corruption in the West, pointing to things like the Epstein scandals as his proof that justifies Russia needing to step in and act as this restrainer. So, faced with this really intense apocalyptic worldview, what does the author of the post do? He doesn't get into a geopolitical debate. Instead, he pivots to something more fundamental, quoting this verse from the Gospel of John. He's saying the real fight isn't East versus West. It's much simpler. It's light versus darkness.
This all leads to the author's proposed solution, which is pretty bold: radical transparency. The logic goes something like this.
Secrecy is the perfect breeding ground for corruption, and that corruption, whether it's real or just perceived, is the fuel for these dangerous, apocalyptic worldviews like Dugin's. So the only way to diffuse the whole thing, he argues, is with sunlight. You have to drag the evil deeds out into the open where they lose all their power.
And that brings us right back to where we are now, leaving us with this really big question to chew on. We've gone from the esoteric to geopolitics to AI. And in this new world we're building, a world of black box AIs and algorithms we don't fully understand, is a radical commitment to transparency, to sunlight, our last best defense?